How do you shade a pixel art character? Let's say you've already come up with a really cool design, but now you want to color the character in that good old classic 16-bit style. There's a lot of different mistakes you can make while you're doing this, and I can say that because I've made a lot of shading mistakes over the course of my life. So I want to talk about the ways that you can improve your shading techniques in pixel art to make this thing look as best as you can. Let's do it. Hey guys, I'm Andrew. I've mentioned on the channel before that I started pixel art back when I was a kid just doing Mega Man comics. The majority of those comics were in the 8-bit Mega Man style, so I didn't really have to worry about shading very much. But sometimes I would work on some Mega Man Zero comics instead. Those video games are 16-bit. Now there's a lot of things you can learn just by going in and trying to replicate a game's style, but when you're doing pixel art even this way, there's a lot of stuff that you can miss or just not even understand. So that's why I made this character. He's an adult, he is not a mutant, he is not a ninja, and he is not a turtle. He is a tortoise. But to make sure that he's especially legally distinct, he's a lawyer. That's my wife's idea. Anyway, I've got 7 different versions of this character that we can talk about, shaded in different ways, most of those ways being mistakes that I have made over the years, and I want to help you guys avoid those mistakes too. So right here he's just a standard 8-bit style. This could be it, but I do just want to throw out there you can also take things one step further. So with this second version of the character, I used that red color for his base model and also colored his pants and a little bit on his shell, and it gives him a little bit more depth. I also did a white dot on his shoulder as a highlight. But you're probably here for 16-bit art, so here's a new color palette for us to work with, ranging from black to white and then different shades of red and yellow. And this first version of shading is what's called pillow shading. Pillow shading is when you're not really taking into account the shape of the character or the light source involved. What you're doing instead is you're going from the darkest color on the outside of the character to lighter on the inside. The problem, of course, with this is that the character has no real depth. So next I'm going to use the exact same color palette, plus one color, and completely redo it. Let's take a look at that. With this version of the character, you can tell there are a lot of improvements already. The only thing that I changed as far as the color palette is I added this extra little highlight. Now the way that I picture the light source for the character is that it is in front of him, up above, and to the right a little bit from the camera. So if you look at the way that the character is shaded, the sections that are on our left are a little bit darker than the colors over on the other side, and that helps provide a little bit more depth so that you can understand the shape and clarity a little bit more. The next step involved is going to be the most subtle, but I do think it's one of the most important. With this version, what I've done is I actually took the exact same sprite from before with the way that it was colored, but I darkened the areas that are a little bit further away from the camera. And what that does is it helps the character look a little bit more 3D. This is especially apparent with him kicking, right? So in a video game or with video game style sprites, you want your characters to be as readable as possible at a quick glance. Now let's talk about the colors that I've used for the character, because this is the most important part, I think, for making a character look really just visually good and help him to pop a little bit more. What I did originally with this color palette is I started with really the mid-tone for the color, and then for each shade darker, what I would do is I would change the brightness down and turn the saturation up a little bit. So each shade goes a little bit more, like in a diagonal line, lightest to darkest, to get a little bit more saturated. Now, if you don't know what color saturation is, it essentially is how much of the color is the color, right? So how red is your red versus how kind of gray is your red. But we should also discuss a concept called hue shifting. It's a really common practice in pixel art to shift that hue a little bit more towards blue as the shades get darker. So with this version of the character, all I did was adjusted the hue shifting for the colors. So at a glance, the character is still definitely red. But if you were to zoom way in on the darkest color of the red that I used for his outline, it's actually almost like a purpley maroon color instead of dark red that I was using before. The pants have a little bit more blue to them, and so does the character's hair. Now let me discuss the yellow also, because I always have a hard time just mentally with yellow for a minute. I get stuck because do you shift it towards green and then to blue, because that's actually kind of the closest route for it to get there, or do you shift it towards orange, then red, then purple, then blue? That's actually the way that I usually like to do it. So for my yellow shell here, it's going from yellow to orange, and then we're getting into that red. And actually by doing that, I don't even need as many shades on this character as I did before. When you combine shades like that, you actually can make the character more visually cohesive. So now let's talk about the final version of this character and what I think is really the best version. Now, as you can see, he looks essentially the same as before, but there are some new things going on that make it look a little bit stronger. I swapped out the hair, and by introducing those tones, I was actually able to combine some of the red I had used before with that, and again, reduce the size of the color palette. And I felt like the character's face wasn't really quite popping the way that I wanted it to, and so I went with that bright blue eye here. And that's it. Well, almost it. Let's give him a briefcase. Aha, much better, right? Now he's ready to go to work for the day, and then he's ready to go do some, kick fighting, kick dancing, something like that. Let me know in the comments what else you guys would like to talk about with pixel art. Really appreciate you guys being here. This is wonderful. I love every single thing about doing this. You guys are great. Anyway, follow along for more pixel practice. He kind of looks like a cross between Charizard and Squirtle, now that I think about it. So maybe Squirtle's Ard.